I'll just present this to the panel, and then you can decide who would like to address these questions as they come in. The first question is, why isn't Power Systems listed as a certified solution for HANA? I think you kind of touched on that a little bit in your presentation, Alfred.
Sure. So the basic issue is that SAP has a certification matrix. That certification matrix is all about appliances. So it's the full stack, it's the systems, it's the network, it's the storage. So the things that are certified are those things which are defined as appliances. There's a different aspect of this, which is the support issue. So when you look at support, Power is listed as a supported system. So it has equal level of support from an SAP perspective for the code running on it and for defect support, etc. Do you have anything else you want to add to that?
No, the customer does, though, need to run go through the process to validate that the configuration they're implementing does perform to SAP's requirements. Once they've done that and they get the certification that says, yes, you're good, then they're fine in the TDI model.
Very good.
Thank you, gentlemen. Oh, more questions coming in. Next question is, other vendors are supported at much higher memory. Other vendors are supported at much higher memory levels for HANA than Power, some up to 20 terabytes. How will IBM catch up?
You want to take that?
Sure. So the physical platform can support, on the largest size, the E880, up to 32 terabytes of memory. That said, SAP currently supports up to 9 terabyte for a Suite on HANA and an S4 HANA environment. Most customers are going to be well within that. So I would say for the 95% of the customers out there, we already address all the requirements that they have today. So that's the first thing to understand. The second thing is, we're the new guy on the block. We were just recently announced as being supported, and S4 and Suite on HANA were only announced in November of last year. So we're a little bit of a catch-up mode, but this is a question of SAP, they're conservative. They like to make sure that the platform works and that they have actual customer experience. So just like HP and SGI went through, they had customers who said, we want to push to higher levels. And so SAP has said, hey, customers, if you want to push to higher levels than are formally supported, work with us. Work with IBM, we'll work together, we'll get it supported, we'll get it approved, and as soon as we do that, then we will list them as supported. This is why you've seen a gradual availability of products over time, because once again, SAP said, let's have some customer experience to make sure it works. Even though we know it's on a common code base, we want to make sure that we have that experience before we list as generally available to everybody. So you'll see the support for much larger memory models come in very quickly over time.
Yeah, SAP is very conservative in that regard, and they want to make sure that they're giving their customers the best performance and the best environment to operate their business. So we will catch up.
So basically, the infrastructure is there to support it, but if you want to go beyond the 9 terabytes today, just ask. Just tell SAP that's what you want to do, and they'll work with you to get you through it.
Absolutely.
Right. In fact, we have an environment set up in our Poughkeepsie Benchmark Center at 24 terabytes to support a particular customer right now.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much. More questions are coming in. Thank you very much from our audience. Another question is, Intel systems cost less than Power. So why would I want to spend more when HANA includes built-in software resiliency?
I'll touch on that first. You really want to look at making your systems as resilient as possible up front. You don't want to get into a situation where you're forced into a failure mode. You want the system to be able to recover from and not affect the user community because of a component failure. So the more resilient you can make the system up front, the less you have to rely on software, HA, or heaven forbid, DR to recover from a failure scenario. So you get better performance and you get a better user experience if you have higher resiliency just right out of the gate. The other thing is that the virtualization that we can provide. We can do quite a bit more in the area of virtualization than Intel can, and we have significantly better performance as well. So core-to-core pricing may be a bit different, but what are you doing on that platform for the money you spend is the question.
Yeah, I think one of our customers put it very bluntly to us, and when we asked them why they chose us over Intel, and they said it was just a matter of economics. They were going to have to build a very, very large x86 environment versus putting in fewer power enterprise systems. On top of that, they said, then it boils down to mathematics. And we said, what do you mean? And the CIO said, if I have to build an Intel environment that is this large, then I'm looking at roughly a 40% better chance of Intel memory failing on a daily basis than I am from a power perspective.
I'll add another thing in the area of TCO is that, and once again, this becomes a TCA versus a TCO discussion. From a TCO perspective, you're looking at the cost of the project. Even if power is more expensive, and we did one analysis for a customer over in Germany where we found for their particular environment that the power environment was in fact going to be 17% more on a cost of systems. However, that had less than a 2% impact on the cost of the project. So you have to look at the project, and now you say, hey, if I have a more resilient environment, and remember, even in a best case scenario, we're looking at 5, 15, or 30 minutes recovery time, even with software resiliency. And do you really want to have that sort of situation where you're dealing with recovery after failure as opposed to building it in? It's like an insurance policy. You want the insurance policy in the event that you have a problem. You don't want to have an insurance policy because you want to have problems.
Excellent, thank you very much. Question number 4 is, which customers have selected Power on HANA? Do we have customers we can share, or is this it right here?
No, this is not the...
Thank you.
The number of customers that have implemented, so we already have over 200 customers worldwide who are either implementing, are in production, or have secured systems in support of HANA on Power. We have about 5 of those customers that are currently signed up as formal references. In the United States, we have Kennametal, which is signed up. They're currently using Suite on HANA, and they're very quickly moving towards S4 HANA. Not a formal reference, but presented at Sapphire and ASUG is Pfizer with a very large BW environment. And then around the world, there are a number of other customers that have signed up to be formal references. We can get customers in contact with customers who are currently using HANA as well as on Power, as well as we can give details in terms of how the environment is actually set up to optimize it for customers on request.
Additionally, I think it's fair to say, because we've been recognized since the general availability of HANA on Power, it has been adopted more quickly than on the Power platform than it was before on Intel.
Excellent, excellent, thank you very much. Another question that came is, why HANA, why IBM?
Why HANA and why IBM?
Well, why HANA is that's the value proposition I started with, which is that HANA, with the in-memory computational capabilities, the columnar access, can significantly speed up the environment. By having concurrent analytics, you're making decisions based on what's happening now, not what happened yesterday. As we move forward into S4, the simplification of the environment says that you can do things like closings on a regular basis or on a dynamic as-needed basis, as opposed to waiting 30 to 90 days and then saying, I had a problem a while back. Now you can find the problem as it's going on. So that's the why HANA story. That's highly simplified. SAP does a much better job of explaining this. However, the why Power story is it's about virtualization. It's about reliability and flexibility and great performance.
Thank you. Another question is, I'm running a legacy version of SAP. How do I take advantage of HANA?
So I'm assuming by legacy that they're talking about a traditional ECC environment. The answer is twofold. First off, application servers that are set up for the current environment will work going forward as long as at the right enhancement pack level for SAP. So that's the first part. The second part is they can reuse the systems they have, assuming they have Power 8, and for non-production they can use Power 7 Plus. But otherwise, there is a migration required in order to move from the environment that they have today to move into a HANA environment.
But that's just an SAP statement. I mean, you will have to migrate.
Right, you have to
But-
migrate the,
yeah,
the
there's-
database.
there's no
if it's
real way around
in
that.
Yeah, if it's in another
But,
form.
but you're right, the beauty of having it, if you're already on Power, you can just simply carve out an LPAR, you can virtualize that out, you can then build up the environment, test it, and then transition your workload over, basically reusing the same infrastructure that you had. Really simplifies, you don't have to bring in a lot of extra infrastructure, and it's really simplifies your project.
And we've seen a lot of customers who are doing this today. We have a very large energy customer in the United States whom we have sold systems to that are currently running SAP on AIX, that we have sold them what we call a path to HANA. And what we've done in that case is we've sold them Linux on Power as additional capability on those boxes so that they can, over time, install at their leisure and kick the tires and then begin their process of moving.
That's probably something a lot of people don't think about up front is the fact that the Linux operating system is just another operating system that runs in a separate LPAR from AIX or IBM. And they're basically equal on the system. You can run mix and match any number that you want of each.
Right.
So
And
it really makes
the performance is much better than you get on other virtualization platforms.
Absolutely.
The overhead of Power VM is very small comparatively speaking to competition, and it's much faster.
Right.
So.
Okay, now we're going to some audience participation questions, but again, if you're live streaming, please continue to send us your questions. They've been great, so thank you for that. One of the audience participation question is, what percentage of your HANA and Power customers are new to IBM?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I don't know.
I don't know the exact numbers, but we have had some converts. We've had a few in the United States. I know there have been some worldwide, but I don't know the exact numbers, but we have had some converts who've left IBM and then come back. I don't know if we have any true never been with IBM. Maybe you know.
We actually do have a few that
Okay.
have never been with IBM before. They were traditional customers, SAP customers on an Intel platform. We've had others who were on other historic platforms. There's been a mix. I will say the larger percentage of customers have come from IBM install bases, but it has been surprising, in fact, how many customers have come to us and said, hey, we need to talk because we're having reliability issues in our Intel platform, or we've hit a limit. We had a few customers who came to us and said, we purchased a system, and then we ran into a limit of that appliance. It could only grow so large. And then rather than being able to dynamically grow the size as you can with many of the Power platforms, they were forced into throwing away that asset and buying something new. And that was a little bit frustrating for them. So we're getting very good acceptance, very good interest from the customers who are not historically Power, as well as those, of course, who were Power.
And I think that raises a very good point with the entire appliance arena. If you purchase an appliance to do 512 megabytes or gigabytes of overall space, and then you eclipse that, you've got to go buy another appliance. You can't just take that appliance and upgrade it. Right. So this is key for the future, especially when you're driving a lot of applications into the in-memory database arena. That's really where a lot of development is going today. There's a plethora of companies out there that are doing it. HANA just happens to be the best at the moment from SAP.
Especially with things like CUOD up on the enterprise servers, you
Sure.
can basically populate it and then turn on the memory as you need it as you grow, which gives you a built-in path without having to rip out infrastructure.
Exactly.
Excellent. Do you have customer references that we can talk with?
Absolutely.
Well,
So we have
mentioned a couple.
Mentioned a couple. There are, I believe, 5 customers that are currently signed up as formal references around the world, and we have more in the pipeline. So we expect that number will grow substantially over time. So absolutely, we have customers that we'd be happy to make available to have other customers talk to, and or we can share briefs that those customers have written up or have talked about formally in ASUG and other types of meeting environments.
And we're courting others all the time. We've had a couple of ASUG meetings in the last month, along with SAP Sapphire, where there were at least 2 talks that were given, one by Pfizer, and they gave their decision tree and how they went about deciding that they were going to go with Power over Intel for their environment. It's a very compelling informational session.
Excellent, thank you. What resources are available for architects I'm assuming this says transforming, there's a little Egyptian hieroglyphics here, but transforming from, say, AIX to Linux, training and support. So for an architect that's in-house, what resources are available to the customer to help them transition from their existing environment to a HANA on Power environment?
So IBM has taken the lead in educating our business partner community. Obviously, we have a large business partner community that is focused right now on what we call the Linux Challenge. As part of that Linux Challenge, those 30 or so business partners in the United States, for example, are getting education probably quarterly, and we're training them about how SAP HANA is differentiated on Linux on Power, but it's not as though we're abandoning the AIX side of the equation, so they don't have to choose between them. We still offer both, and we'll continue to offer both for the foreseeable future, but we are taking a lead in that. And so we also have, as Alfred mentioned earlier, we have a number of resources that are available to them from our labs in Austin, but also we have a center in Europe, and a plethora of information that they have access to.
And speaking directly about the architects within an account, so there are usually system architects, SAP architects, a variety of different type of individuals like that. The first thing to understand is this is just another LPAR. So
Right.
all of the techniques that are used to manage the environment, to architect, to do capacity planning, and other related IT infrastructure roles, they're still there. The ability to modify and change LPARs, it's all based on the common environment that has already been set up in most of these accounts. So it is not a radical change. Of course, we do have a best practices guide, and SAP has on the order of about 8 or 10 different SAP notes that speak specifically to how to utilize Power in this environment. Beyond that, we have a number of architects, both at thinkASG and other companies, as well as IBM, that will work with customers as far as going through the whole effort of architecting for a HANA on Power environment.
And I just wanted to say to your point, thinkASG happens to be one of those 30 partners who's in the Linux on
In
Challenge.
fact, one of those architects is actually sitting between you two. Is there any savings on SAP licenses using Power Systems versus Intel?
No. So SAP has been very clear here in terms of how they license, and that license is vendor agnostic. It does not matter which vendor you're using. It is the same cost regardless. SAP has multiple different methodologies based on how you're using the environment, but it can be based on a percentage. If you want a runtime license, for instance, it can be based on a percentage of the SAP application cost. If you're running a data mart, there's a different methodology, but that's based on the size of the memory. But there is no difference based on the architecture or the vendor choosing to support the environment.
But that's really a good answer, though. I mean, it's just
It is.
neutral.
It's fair because it's neutral,
Yeah.
right? They're not taking a position that says, we favor this platform over this one. So it levels the playing field, and it gives IBM the capability to really shine where we've shined for decades, and that is the resiliencies of our systems. And that's really one of the key aspects that our customers have been pointing out to us who've been on the trail to adoption.
Both the resiliency and the scalability, correct?
Scalability, absolutely. So our enterprise class systems scale vertically, whereas our scale out systems, as Alfred pointed out, will scale horizontally out to n number of nodes, 19?
Well, 16
16.
nodes, and that's for a BW or an analytics
Right.
environment. So,
But the key here is that our systems have this capability, and as we were talking a little bit earlier about the virtualization elements, you've set up virtualization very, very easily, and it's easy to maintain and change those elements within the operating system. So you're just adding on an LPAR that is going to be running Linux, for example.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I'm getting a plethora of audience participation. I thank you for that. And again, if you're online, continue to send in your questions. Somebody's going to have to keep me honest on timing, because as questions come in and we have a great panel here, we'll just keep going until somebody pulls the plug.
We have about 12 minutes according to the clock.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for being there. Some part of Business Suite can run on HANA, ERP, BW, CRM, SCM. What happens to things like EP, XI, SM, Business Objects, exec?
So that's where you have to look at the matrix, and this is an SAP statement. SAP has basically said they want to have everything running on HANA over time. There are certain things that have not yet gotten there, but that is, I would say, a relative minority of those things. So Solution Manager, for instance, is supported in the HANA environment. Enterprise Portal and others might take a little bit longer, but they're all coming along in that path. But this is not a power statement. This is an SAP statement. And SAP has made it very clear. The database of the future is going to be HANA, and therefore everything will eventually run against that database. Now, that doesn't mean you have to switch today. In fact, that's a very important thing to understand, which is that SAP has said they will continue to support their customers using conventional databases through 2025. Now, that means support. It doesn't mean enhancements. Enhancements, of course, are coming in the area of things like S4, the simplification and the changing in the processes, the Fiori interfaces, et cetera. So enhancements versus support is important to differentiate, but customers do not have to switch tomorrow because they're going to lose some capability they already have today.
No, that's good. That's a good response. That's absolutely 100%. People need to understand that. And as we mentioned earlier, we're working with SAP day in, day out throughout the world. And when customers start asking questions about this, we have the capability of answering it, but we have SAP, our alliance team, and those people behind us to step in and give them the exact same answer. So.
Superb, thank you. Based on your experience, which hardware platform can we get a better TCO? I guess what they're asking, what is your
Of course,
TCO?
I'm biased.
Yeah, well, okay, but so I'll just rephrase this question. You know, there was a question earlier about Intel's less expensive than Power, but then you talked about the scalability of Power. You can use less processors to do more workload and scale up, scale down. So sometimes on your initial TCO or your initial acquisition cost, Power, IBM Power may have the appearance of being more expensive than an Intel, but as you scale up and you have your Intel farm and have to support an Intel environment versus a Power environment, your TCA is significantly less. How can you articulate that for a customer? Because if I'm an accountant or the CFO, I'm going to be looking at costs. My IT people are going to be looking at performance. How do we meld that together in a way the customer can?
That's a great question, and we offer Eagle studies that we can do. That we come in and we will bring in either an IBM team or an IBM sponsored team that is completely segregated from us. It's available to our business partners who will come in and do an independent study, and they take the configurations that the customer provides to them, not what IBM gives them, but what the customer gives to them, and they do a separate study that shows them, here's your TCA, here's your TCO costs. And it gives the customer that neutral third-party capability. And I will just tell you that when people say, well, IBM sponsors it, that it's probably rigged, I would say absolutely it's not. We have been face-to-face, head-to-head with Intel, and this company and our own internal Eagle study teams have come back and said, they got us beat. They got us beat. So but that's not necessarily the determining factor all the time either. They may come up and we may be right on par, or we may be leaps and bounds above them, or we may be below them slightly. but the customer at least has that in their quiver so that they can have that as a decision point.
And I'm sorry, you were to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's important to note, though, that every customer environment is different.
Yes.
And so the analysis has to be done specific to the customer's environment, the size of the environment that they have, the requirements for reliability, HA and DR, all of these things really go into it. You can't just say, one is more expensive than the other, every day of the week.
Right.
Every environment is different, and it has to be looked at individually.
It's not a simple calculator that
No,
we can just throw
not
out
at
there,
all.
or you can find on the internet and go, well, what's going to be, more cost effective?
Yeah.
And absolutely, virtualization plays a big role there,
Huge,
because you
huge,
look at the
huge,
non-production
huge.
environment, you look at all the QA, the dev, the test, the sandbox environments, as well as until customers are totally converged, they're still going to have different components for different purposes. You're going to have application servers. You put them all together, and what looks initially to be a more expensive platform often becomes less expensive when all the costs are included: systems management, network costs,
Infrastructure, all the infrastructure
power
pieces.
and cooling, floor space. And then there's the additional cost of uptime, or downtime, if you will.
Right.
Now, a lot of times that's not included in the evaluation, but that often changes
should
the
be.
scale from being slightly more expensive for power to be a lot less expensive
Right.
because of the reduction of downtime.
And I won't use the customer's name, but we had a very large customer who chose Power over Intel because they were going to have 6 enterprise class Power servers versus 350 Intel boxes that would have to be introduced to their floor.
It's a lot of cabling.
It's not only, but yeah, absolutely.
That's a lot of infrastructure.
But it's mind-boggling.
A lot of heat, power,
There's a lot of heat. There's a lot of
There's a lot of
there's a
everything.
lot of cost behind the scenes that people just don't get. When you look at the licensing perspective, just from not HANA, but from the perspective of all the other components that are going into that, it's just mind-boggling how much is there.
Well, from my vantage point, working with Rod in our customer stack, and we support, our customer base is predominantly SAP customers running on Power, and we're seeing the conversion going over to HANA on Power Linux. But one of the things I think Rod really does very well is when he's architecting and designing that solution, we'll look at, the customer will have an Intel-based solution, then look at Rod's solution, they go, well, you don't have this included in your solution, you don't have that included in your solution. Rod goes, because it's not required.
Right.
And so by having a really concise architectural environment can also be a big cost savings factor.
Well, Alfred made a very subtle point just a moment ago, and that is that where we really shine is our capabilities within the enterprise class platform to run multiple workloads without impacting the overall performance of the machine. We can do so much more in our capabilities or in our hardware platform than they can on the Intel side. I mean, it's a given. And it takes fewer machines, but to Alfred's point, when you can run the application servers all on these boxes, and you're running the databases on these boxes, now you're consolidating down, you have one platform.
Thank you,
Less
Doug, by the
cost.
way. I've never been called subtle before.
That's true, you haven't.
How much more effort is required to support the IBM TDI HANA deployment model versus other vendors' appliance models? Part 1. Part 2, what if you would purchase the CTS services with the TDI model?
For the first
So I
one,
think we need, first of all, I think we need to define what TDI and CTS stand for.
TDI is the Tailored Data Center Integration, which is the way you buy the components separately on the Power Platform compared to an appliance, which is all one stack. So in terms of simplicity, there's no question, if I bring in an appliance that has everything pre-configured, that's going to be fast. It doesn't mean that it comes ready to run. There's still usually about a 3 to 5 day setup service that is required even with an appliance model, because it has to be customized to run for a particular customer environment. So the difference in time is not as substantial as might be considered. But also remember, most customers have existing standards, they have existing storage subsystems, existing networks. And if you want to have the management capabilities to work with those things that you have currently, then TDI is going to be a much easier thing to integrate into the environment. So it's important to understand that what might be an upfront speed comes at a downstream cost of management using the tools and techniques and standards that customers have today.
And the IBM Power TDI model typically is simpler. There's less infrastructure involved, and it's easier to manage than you have with if you had to do multiple of the appliances to get to the same workload. So you'd have a simpler infrastructure to maintain.
That's significant. Rod, you may want to speak up just a tad, but I'm having a hard time hearing you, and I'm pretty close to you.
Okay.
Is the CPU granularity available on other hardware platforms? I think Rod, you talked about that earlier in your capacity on demand question, or?
I'm not sure what they mean by CPU granularity. I'm not sure what they're getting at with that question.
Well, we can start as small as a 4-core environment. We can increment on a 1-core basis.
Right.
So we can very, very granular with power. For x86, it tends to come in bigger chunks in terms of the number of cores. However, that really is not the most important question. In the virtualization area, that's a different story, because then your granularity is based on a socket, because an entire socket has to be dedicated to each production VM.
For Intel.
For Intel.
For Intel.
For the Power Platform, it's a 1-core basis. So it is far more granular for Power than it is for Intel in the virtualized world.
Okay, thank you. Anything to share about IBM's Linux on Power commitment?
It's huge.
Yeah, well, let's see, where do I begin? Well, I mean, so IBM has begun this shift. As many people may know, the Power Platform supports many different operating systems, from IBM I or Heritage OS 400 through AIX iterations, and now through Linux on Power. And IBM is committed to this because of the change and the shift in the market space itself. There is a tremendous movement within businesses across all verticals that are moving towards Linux because of its cost effectiveness and because of its support. And IBM has recognized this shift, and we've been participating in Linux for quite some time, along in the mainframe world and in Power. But now we're taking the bull by the horns and we are pushing this through. And SAP and IBM with HANA on Power, this is a commitment statement from IBM that we're here to stay.
Well, gentlemen, I got the look at the watch from the gentleman in the back of the room, so I think we're out of time. I want to thank very much Alfred and Doug for coming out this afternoon and presenting. So thank you both for that. I'd like to put in a plug for my engineer architect, Rod Davis. He's been phenomenal in the accounts that we've worked with. We have, one of the questions from the audience are the referenceable accounts. And in the IBM sphere, you have worldwide referenceable accounts. In our world, in Doug and Tom's, or Rod and Tom's world, we have some very large enterprise accounts that are doing what we're talking about today, where we're seeing some tremendous success in the marketplace. Again, this is hosted by thinkASG today, IBM, and again, thank you for coming. It's been fantastic.